Hi, everyone, and welcome. I know we have people in all time codes, so I'll just say welcome. It is a pleasure to welcome you to Gratz College in general, and more specifically to this talk tonight with Jonathan Mooney as we celebrate our new Master of Science degree in Special Education. I am Philip Moore. I am a faculty member here at Gratz College, where I teach courses in creativity and leadership and the history of education. And I'm also the program director for our graduate level programs in education, which includes this brand new degree. We are super excited about this new special ed degree, and we hope that anyone who wants to learn more about the degree and what's in it and the application and what learning online is like at Gratz to stay on this call after Jonathan's done, and we will talk all things Gratz and education. Before we get started, I do want to thank some amazing colleagues without whom tonight would not be possible. Lori Cohen, Ali Resnick, Adrian Nolan, Mindy Cohen, and Suzette Martinez Quiles, who are doing all the detailed work, all the important heavy lifting that goes into putting on an event like this so that we can all come together and talk about these really big and important ideas. Bringing people together is something that Gratz College does very well. Creating communities that are sometimes virtual like this and sometimes in real time. Uh, Bringing and making groups of people who are thinking very deeply about the world um, and the concept of applied learning and teaching and learning in general. The folks I just mentioned are very busy at Gratz because we have a lot going on. And so if you're new to Gratz, I just want to take a moment to boast about all of the good work that we're doing. We hope that you'll check us out on gratz.edu so you can find out more about all this information and see how to get involved. But a few things I want to point out that you would notice. One, you will see our legendary master's and PhD program in Holocaust and Genocide Studies. It was the first of its kind to be online for a PhD program. And because it's online, students and teachers come from all over the globe. And they're doing so much interesting work in all different areas. And Gratz gets to be that hub where they come to talk about this. And if you're in Philadelphia, the greater Philadelphia area, also in March, you may check out the annual Arthur and Esther Tusman Memorial Holocaust Teach-In. And I think this year they're really focusing on the role of technology in Holocaust education. You will also see a brand new Master of Arts in Anti-Semitism Studies. And this is the first degree of its kind that's degree granting for this essential and important topic. Again, this is online. So students and teachers can come from all over. And we have an amazing lineup of students and faculty who are leading this study, but they're able to teach with us at Gratz. And there's a real focus on experiential learning with these students. So there's so much interesting work going on, from presentations to leading workshops to interning at academic journals that those students are involved in. Um, you will see our brand new PhD in Jewish Studies that's about to launch. There is an amazing first cohort for that program. And I sit on the curriculum committee, so I've been really fun to watch this program take shape. I know that there's a lot of creativity and energy behind reimagining, humanities and how we study that online, and public scholarship. And again, because we're online, bring students from all over. And there's a range of students that are set to start with that. And they also, online, you may check out a series of summer lectures that will help launch that program. You will see our EDD, that's the Education Doctorate Program. This program brings together people from Jewish education, higher ed, and K through 12 spaces to think about leadership. It's a program that is the model for adult learning, where it really centers the students' professional experience as the main contribution that they bring to the classroom, and pushing the students to use that experience towards reflection and application. Our nonprofit management master's degree, you will also see working professionals, both the teachers and the students, who are learning those important skills to navigate the nonprofit world, those really, specific skills of fundraising, strategic planning, finance, all the stuff that is needed to make that work go on. If you look at our non-credit programs, especially if you're in the Philadelphia area, you'll see so many options for study, courses, coming together for fellowship, the amazing Lunch and Learn series, as well as you should check out a brand new Bala Kinwood campus that's going to be for Gratz, that's right outside Philadelphia. And one of the amazing cool parts about that is that on the campus footprint is the first, I was gonna say oldest, but I think it's the first and the same, maybe the oldest library in that area, in the Bala Kinwood area. So it's going to be an even more exciting building to check out. And you will see Gratz, if you look online. Gratz is Gratz's digital lab. It's bringing together people and artifacts and making this amazing collection. I can't tell you everything that's in there because it would take a long time, but some highlights. The Holocaust Oral History Project, which has been something like 45 years, I think, in the making that digital and online. The Elie Wiesel collection, amazing. That will be online. And even the letters of Rebecca Gratz. And the cool thing there, of course, is it's like not just curating and hosting those artifacts, but making them available and for the classwork. So it's really integrating it into the classes and the learning that we're doing. So again, reimagining digital archiving and what that can look like. Do it. So if you see a theme here, hopefully it's that we're always bringing together people to work on these ideas. I should also probably mention our education programs, because those are the programs that I run here at Gratz. We run courses every 8 weeks. We have about 8 courses that run every 8 weeks. We're really proud of the lineup of courses. We think there's a lot of amazing coursework. All the students are working teachers who take them. So we have amazing online environments, and those students are sometimes just taking credits here or there if you need 3 credits or 30 credits. Sometimes they're getting an MED degree, sometimes a Master of Science in Teaching Practice, and sometimes now the Master of Science in Special Education. I think this new program that we have is a worthy companion to all of that important work that I talked about that's going on here at Gratz, all of it allowing us to inspire teachers to make a direct impact in the lives of their students. And finally, before I introduce Jonathan, I do want to thank our president, Dr. Zev Elif, who is the engine on which all of this energy and movement turns. It was his encouragement that we would create this degree and get it approved by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, which we've done. And I also appreciate that he's allowed us to host a talk tonight that's called Normal Sucks. All of us at Gratz are really glad that you're here. We appreciate your interest and willingness to be part of this presentation with this name. Not every day that you see sucks in the title of a presentation that a college is putting out there. Normal Sucks, of course, is the name of a book by tonight's speaker, Jonathan Mooney. Although I have never met Jonathan in person, we do share an intellectual signpost. And by signpost, I mean someone in our academic history who has impacted our journey. As teachers and students, and I know on this call, everyone's probably, is very knows this as well. As teachers and students, you can relate to the importance of someone like this who we meet on this journey, someone who introduces us to a book or shows us a better way to do an annotated bibliography, Or maybe there's just somebody who cheers us on as we chase a kind of wild dream or idea. Jonathan and I share in common an artist, educator, and contemporary transcendentalist named Pete Hawking. Today, Pete is a full-time artist on Cape Cod. But when Jonathan knew him, he was the director of the Howard R. Swearer Center for Public Service at Brown University, from which Jonathan graduated with an honors degree in English Lit in the year 2000. 5 years ago, Pete wrote a special topics course for us here at Gratz College. It was a course for in the EDD program. That course included some work by Jonathan Mooney. That was the first time I was exposed to Jonathan's ideas. But when I read some of this work and get to see inside his mind at work, I could easily understand something about our shared intellectual space. We are people who believe in intelligence as a superpower. It's a superpower because, like William James and John Dewey taught us, it can be used to change a situation, ideally for the better. But we also know that this ability to exercise this intelligence does not just happen automatically, that it needs to be nurtured and developed. So if we take this to heart, if we accept that teaching then is about something bigger, a higher calling, changing people's lives, changing the world, then we should be concerned with making this ability to learn available to as many people as possible. Jonathan's work, his writings, his presentations, inspires us to keep this pursuit alive in both our thinking and our practice. It reminds us to think about how we approach learning, even if it means we are asking hard questions, trying things that might not work, or dissenting from what is considered normal. I won't say more about Jonathan because getting to know him is part of the fun of his presentations. But I will say, again, I hope you want to hear more about our new degree in special ed. You'll stay on after the Zoom meeting. And also check out gratz.edu to follow all of that stuff that we're doing. It's a very exciting time to be part of the Gratz community. As for this presentation, we're hoping that you will keep your mics muted. But any questions, any thoughts, any ideas that you have, please put in the chat. And we'll kind of collect that as we go. And then we will look at those chats and we'll try to include and address as many points as possible. So if that all sounds good, again, we thank you for being here and please welcome Jonathan Mooney.
Well, hey, everybody. My name's Jonathan, and I'm just so grateful to be spending some time with y'all virtually tonight. Now, before I do my thing, I have just a few pieces of housekeeping, if you'll bear with me. First of all, I want to reiterate how I'd like to spend our time together. I read recently that the average human attention span is about 5 minutes. And then I read that the average attention span of somebody on a Zoom call on a Thursday evening is about 5 seconds. So I promise y'all that I'm going to do my best to respect that research, keep my talking at you down to a manageable minimum, and then make sure that we set aside a good amount of time to talk together in the form of questions, conversation, and dialogue. So as Philip mentioned, if you can put any thoughts, any questions, any ideas that come to mind during my prepared remarks into the chat, we'll jump into those and we'll use those as a catalyst for dialogue and conversation at the conclusion of my talking at you part of the night. So I hope that sounds like an okay way to hang out a little bit together this evening. Second piece of housekeeping, more important piece of housekeeping. Hey, I want to give a big old shout out to everyone at Gratz. Obviously, I want to thank them for the opportunity to be here tonight. with you to be a part of this amazing, innovative, and transformative learning community that they've built. But I also want to give them a specific shout out for being a leader in the country, in the nation, on not just access to learning through online and digital formats, but in elevating and prioritizing and celebrating learning by doing. In Philip's remarks, how many times did we hear the integration between learning and practice in every single academic discipline? And I'll tell you, I've been at this for about 25 years, speaking all over the country to every different type of educational institution you can imagine. And this is rare. This is unique. And this is more important than ever. I also want to recognize and celebrate their commitment to taking this innovative approach, learn by doing, elevating practice to support educators in becoming special educators. You know, young folks with different brains and bodies, they get the short end of the stick now, don't they? That's always been true, but we live in a moment now in which the whole concept of special education is being called into question by federal policymakers at a time when young folks with disabilities and neurodivergence need our support more than ever. So this special education master's program, this matters. It's always mattered, but it matters more than ever. So I hope you all hang out after my presentation and you hear a little bit more about it. But right now, I'd like y'all to give all the good folks at Gratz Philip some love. Send them some clapping hand emojis or some hearts or some fireworks or something, because they're doing good work, and I'm deeply honored to be a small part of that good work tonight. Okay, with all that said and done, I know that was a lot. Let me get right to it. You know, I'm here this evening to talk with y'all about how we can do right and how we can do better by young folks who learn differently. And this is a very personal conversation for me. It's a personal conversation because I learn differently. And as a result of my own neurodivergence, I struggled tremendously in traditional school. You know, I was the kid who had such a hard time sitting still in elementary school that I spent a lot of the day chilling out with the custodian in the hallway. I was the kid who had a really hard time keeping his mouth shut. So I grew up on a first name basis with Shirley, the receptionist in the principal's office. And I was also the kid that had a really hard time with reading. And specifically, I had a torturous time reading out loud. So I spent a lot of my school experience hiding in the bathroom to escape reading out loud with tears streaming down my face. I didn't learn to read until I was 12. Couldn't read until I was 12. Growing up, I had every label you could imagine. You know, I was called the bad kid. I was called the lazy kid, called the at-risk kid. And then eventually I became the special ed kid. I was diagnosed with a continuum of language-based learning disabilities, dyslexia, dysgraphia, and others when I was 9. I was diagnosed with a whole bunch of executive functioning and behavioral problems, ADHD, and others when I was 10. And I ended up dropping out of school for about a year when I was 12. That year, 6th grade, I had a number of mental health challenges. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with depression, and I had a plan for suicide. So you can imagine, by the time I got into middle school and beyond, there were all sorts of low expectations that surrounded me. Low expectations that too often surround young folks who don't fit our institutional idea of the normal learner. I heard it all growing up. My dad told me one day that I would probably be a high school dropout. My father gave me a 50-50 chance of graduating. I was told by a counselor that I'd probably end up being unemployed, never have a job. And then I was told one day in high school by a teacher that I would probably end up in jail. So I'm here tonight in part to share with you my journey, to share with you how I transcended those low expectations, because I did. Opposed to being a high school dropout, as my father said, I became a college graduate. I graduated from Brown University with an honors degree in, of all things, English literature. Opposed to being unemployed, I ended up writing books. First book I wrote as an undergraduate at Brown when I was 21 years old. And most importantly, what I'm most proud of, opposed to being an inmate, I became an advocate, somebody who has dedicated his entire professional life, 25 years, trying to make the world a better place for folks with brain and body differences. So I'm here tonight to share with you that journey, but more importantly, I'm here to share with you what I know can facilitate a journey of change, transformation, and empowerment for young folks who learn outside the lines. Because the bad news is I'm not alone in those low expectations. I'm not alone and was not alone in chilling out with the custodian in the hallway. So many young folks, those square pegs that don't fit the round hole, they're marginalized in educational environments designed for the idea of the normal learner. That's the bad news. But the good news is more than ever, we know what can make a difference in the lives of those young folks who learn differently. We know it from personal testimony. We know it from empirical research. And so what I want to do is I want to share with you all the three things that I know that at their core are very practical, that make a difference in the life of a young person who learns differently. I'm going to share these three things with you for, I don't know, maybe the next 20 minutes or so if I'm concise with my language. And then we'll go to the chat and we'll talk about what's on your mind. So with that said, let me jump right into it. The first core principle of empowerment and thriving for the neurodivergent is to have intentional activities, intentional commitment to help them build a positive learning identity. And that's our first step, because the truth is, so many young folks who don't fit our idea of the normal learner have the antithesis of a positive learning identity. If you would ask me when I was 12 and just left school to describe myself to you, if you would ask me that question when I was 18, I would have said that I'm the stupid, crazy, lazy kid. And I've spoken in all 50 states. I've spoken in most states 3 or 4 or 5 times. I've spoken in 10 countries. And every single time I talk with young folks with learning differences, and I ask them the question that I was asked: how do you describe yourself? At some point, they use some variation of stupid, crazy, lazy, less than, deficient. There's a cultural narrative that normal is good and right, and things that deviate from the middle of the bell curve are deficient and wrong. And a whole host of human beings get that message and internalize that message. And one constituency that gets that message relentlessly is folks who learn differently. Believe that to their core. So our work is to understand the origin of that message? Where does that come from in practice and policy? And then more importantly, what we can do about it. So the origin of that message is this idea that the problem is inside of the learner who doesn't fit the school environment. Normal's good and right, and deficient and different is deficient. Something's wrong with you. I know that in my own life, very practically, very viscerally. I remember when I was diagnosed, right? I was 9 years old. And the school psychologist called me and my mom into her office to give us the test results back. And the moment me and my mom walked into that office, it was obvious that we were there to get terrible, tragic news, right? You know, the lights were turned down low. There was soft jazz music playing in the background. There was a box of tissues on the table. I kid you not, because everybody in that room thought we were getting terrible, tragic news. You know, the word diagnose. We diagnose disease and we diagnose problems. And so they proceeded in that room to read from my diagnoses. And it was deficit this, disorder that. And I left that room and I turned to my mom and I said, "Hey, Ma, what's wrong with me?" That's the identity that I internalized. And that's the identity that we have to have intentional strategies to help young folks extricate themselves from. And that unlearning of that negative identity, it starts by reframing for young people who or what is really the problem. Because I'll tell you, those folks in that room, they got the diagnosis wrong. ADD and dyslexia were not my problem, right? Let me unpack that a little bit for a second. Let's take this thing that was called my problem, ADHD. Hang out with the words: attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It says it right there. Something's wrong with my brain. But the truth is that this thing called my problem was a difference in the truest sense of the word. Now, it's a difference with challenges and limitations that are neurobiologically based. Don't get me wrong. I get that. You know, I struggle with sitting still. I struggle with paying attention and with executive functioning. I have explored the feasibility of stapling my car keys to my forehead. I get it. Those are real problems. But what goes hand in hand with those real problems are a whole bunch of good things that we don't talk enough about. You know, folks with atypical attention span are often better problem solvers than the general population. You know, I came across a research study recently that showed that EMTs, emergency medical professionals, firemen and women, paramedics with ADD are better at their job than so-called normal EMTs. I mean, that makes sense, right? Your house is on fire. You want that dude to have ADD, right? Forget sitting still, you know, come get my cat, right? So it's a difference with good things, with challenges. It's not my problem. Y'all know what my problem was growing up? My problem was the school desk. How in God's name can a school desk be a kid's problem? Well, let me immerse you for a moment into my relationship with the school desk, and it is a fraught relationship. This is my experience. First grade, 12th grade, Brown University. Tonight, if I was sitting in a classroom, 5 seconds in the class, the foot starts bouncing. 10 seconds in the class, both feet start bouncing. 15 seconds in the class, oh, it's all over. I'm the kid trying to take his leg and put it behind his neck, right? And that young person is often shamed because there's a deeply entrenched institutional norm that the good kid is the compliant kid. The good kid sits still, raises their hand, keeps their mouth shut. And if you're not that kid, something must be wrong with you. I got that message at home, at the dinner table with my dad. Jonathan, stop it, stop it, stop it. What's wrong with you? And I got that message in some of my classrooms. Not all of them, don't get me wrong, but some of them. I'll never forget, I had a teacher in second grade named Mrs. C. I've had many, many gifted, brilliant teachers in my life who I will celebrate with you this evening. Mrs. C is not one of those. My foot would be bouncing. She would stop class. She would point at me. All the kids would look at me, and she would say at the top of her lungs, Jonathan, what is your problem? We put the problem in the person. But the truth is, problem wasn't me. Problem wasn't ADD. Problem was the passive learning environment, where on average, young folks spend about 75% of the day sitting still. The problem was the confusion or conflation of good and compliant. And ultimately, the problem was the shame and the social stigma that resulted from being consistently and relentlessly called a problem publicly every day. That's really the problem. The problem wasn't inside of the learner, but in the interaction between the learner and a set of norms in the environment. And the same is true with my so-called learning disabilities. I'm sure y'all know better than I do that learning disabilities constitute the vast majority of young folks receiving services under the Individuals with Disability Education Act and the ADA. And those words, again, imply that the problem is inside of the kid, and that's not true. A lot of people come to my story and they say, hey, Jonathan, you overcame dyslexia, which implies that dyslexia is a bad thing to overcome. The truth is, I didn't overcome dyslexia. If I overcame anything, it was dystechia. That's what I overcame. I overcame being made to feel stupid because my brain worked differently. And I'll tell you, we got a national crisis on our hands of young folks leaving school feeling stupid. And that crisis has an origin. And the origin is a narrow definition of what constitutes intelligence that is institutionalized in our schools. We confuse or conflate being smart with being good at school. But I'm sure y'all know those are different things now, don't you? I mean, some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life didn't read well, didn't write well, didn't spell well, but they could rebuild the car engine from scratch. And that person is just as intelligent and just as valuable to the world as somebody with a 4.0 or a PhD. So that definition of intelligence leaves so many people out. But also, we confuse reading with being smart at a young age. And if you struggle with reading, you often find yourself in the stupid group. Sure, many of y'all remember the smart and stupid group growing up. They didn't call it that. I get it. But it was there, You had the blackbirds over here, you have the bluebirds over here, and then over in the annex trailer building is the sparrows, right? let me put it this way. When I was growing up, everybody knew that my group was the dumb group because my group was a bird that did not fly, okay? It was an ostrich and it ran quickly, And I spent all day long reading See Spot Run. And everybody knew that the condors were the smart group because the condors were reading War and Peace. We're not fooling anybody, Everybody knows the smart group and the stupid group, and everybody knows what gets you in the smart group and the stupid group. And it is not your tactile kinesthetic intelligence. It's not your social emotional IQ. It's not your ability to build, to create, to draw, to talk, or to care about other human beings. What gets you in the smart group is a narrow band of academic skills. And that narrow band of academic skills, that definition of smart, which is institutionalized, it leaves so many people out and it wounds so many people deeply. And that's the problem, not learning differently. So, our first step towards change is to reframe the problem, to reframe it for the people that we care about who have found themselves on the wrong side of normal, who have found themselves given the message that their differences are deficiencies. And our job is to challenge that message, to reframe the problem, and to celebrate these differences for what they are, naturally occurring variations in the human species. And one of the most powerful ways for y'all to do that as teachers, parents, as anyone who cares about this issue is to share stories of a positive future for young folks who learn outside the lines. I told y'all that I had a plan for suicide when I was 12. What saved my life was a videotape, no joke. You know, my mom heard about this interview on Dateline. The interview was with a young man who was in his early 20s. He was at Yale Law School and he couldn't read a word. He was dyslexic. And his mother read every one of his law books to him. My mom made me watch that video, listen to his story. Do you have any idea the hope that image gave me? Now, let's be honest, it sucks to be the guy's mom, right? I get it. I didn't say it was a hopeful message for mom. I said it was a hopeful message for me. That gave me a concrete example. And young people need this more than ever, that different isn't deficient. And there's all sorts of ways, from curating YouTube clips to joining my nonprofit that I founded at Brown called Eye to Eye National, and everything in between, to bring a positive image of a positive future for folks who learn differently. And that's our first step to rebuilding a negative and damaged learning identity. But it's not our only step. Remember, I told you there were three? Let me tell you the second step. And in my life, you know, this was really embodied by my mom. So I just want to tell you a little bit about my mom, give you a mental image of her, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for her. You know, my mom, not a tall woman. On a good day, in high heels, on her tippy toes, my mom is like 4'11", you know, little Irish bulldog. And you know, my mom was underestimated and looked down upon for a lot of her life. You know, my mom struggled in school because the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree. My mom never went to college, barely graduated from high school. My mom had my brother and my two sisters all before she was 19 years old. And she found herself a single mom on public assistance. So folks looked down on her for that. But my mom was also kind of dismissed because she had this funny voice. My mom had a very high-pitched, very squeaky voice. She totally sounds like Minnie Mouse. But I'll tell you, people dismissed my mom at their own peril because my mother cursed like a truck driver. And I'll ask you a question. If you were a teacher or a principal, did you want cursing Minnie Mouse in your face? The answer to that question is no, but that's where my mom was. How do we know she was in that office? Well, every dog in the neighborhood was running away. Only bats could hear her high-pitched obscenities, right? My mom understood something. My mom understood that I didn't need somebody to fix me. What I needed was somebody to fight for my right to learn differently. And those are two very different things. You know, the history of special education is to make the square peg fit the round hole. The word rehabilitate, its Latin root, is to restore to normal or to normality. The rehabilitation industrial complex is all about trying to fix something that's wrong with the person. And the problem is when you fix all the time, the message to the kid is that they're broken. And when you fix too long, too much, too hard, eventually they break. And my mom rejected that model. You know, my mom would say to anyone who would listen, she would say, if my son doesn't learn the way he's taught, well, you should teach the way he learns. Now, I'll admit that's a little bit of a paraphrase because when my mom said it, there were a whole bunch of F-bombs in there that I left out. But nonetheless, that's what she was all about. Change the environment, not the person. And that's a fundamental paradigm shift. And that fundamentally changes the way that one acts with and towards somebody with a learning difference. And the most readily available tool at our disposal to change the environment is to be an advocate for accommodations, which are fundamentally different than services that lead to remediation. You know, my journey of educational success and personal thriving was facilitated not by remediation, but accommodation. I spell at a third grade level to this day. I confuse words that look alike. Who and how, horse and house, they look the same to me. You know, when I went to Brown University, I thought that the university offered a course in orgasmic chemistry. Imagine my disappointment on the first day of that class, right? I didn't fix myself. I used speech to text. I used text to speech. I used time extensions. I used portfolio-based assessment. I used active learning accommodations. I accommodated opposed to remediated my learning differences. And that is your child or your students or your right in any education or work environment. Accommodate, not remediate. Be an advocate for that approach first and foremost. But I want to challenge us to go beyond the construct as educators and as advocates of accommodation for some, because that's what we got going on right now, right? You want to do school differently. You got to go over there, get the psych eval, and the psych eval in Los Angeles and Philadelphia probably costs about $5,000 or more. And then you got to come on back and you got to say, hey, look at all these things wrong with me or my kid. And now you can get the right to do some stuff differently. But that whole system perpetuates and reinforces the notion that these naturally occurring variations in human brains are deficiencies. It's almost a forcing function that lets the status quo stay in place by only accommodating states of being by pathologizing them. We should move beyond accommodation for some. And we should be advocates for accommodations for all, because the truth is we're all on a continuum of learning difference. And the accommodations that I use, speech to text, text to speech, active learning, project-based learning, those benefit a whole continuum of learners. And no student, no human should have to pathologize themselves to have their right to learn differently realized and supported. But ultimately, I want us to go beyond the notion of accommodation in many ways, because accommodation has a negative connotation to it, doesn't it? It's like the word tolerance. You know, we tolerate something that maybe we don't like all that much. Let me put it this way. You know, when my mother-in-law comes to visit me, I don't celebrate her visit. I accommodate her visit, right? So we got to go beyond the construct of accommodation because it's a dead end for us. And we have to be advancing universal design of learning, the bold North Star that we have an ethical obligation to design our learning environments, our communities, our places of work for the reality of human difference, for the reality that disability is an essential part of the human experience, and to broaden the circle of inclusion in our pedagogical practices. Universal design of instruction. Let's be advocates for educational environments that don't just work for some humans, but ultimately work for all. Okay, I got one more for y'all, and then we'll go to that chat. Last concrete step towards thriving is for us to reject the deficit model that surrounds and constrains so many young people who don't fit our idea of the normal learner. You know, if you don't fit school, you hear all about what's wrong with you. You know, I know I did. Jonathan can't spell. Jonathan can't read. Jonathan can't sit still. Jonathan can't. What about what I can do? That deficit model, it's relentless. It's pervasive. It's institutionalized in our practices and procedures. You know, the IEP, the individualized education plan, got to be real about that thing. NSA, KGB got nothing on the IEP. They've been doing deep intel on me my whole life, you know, flying unmanned drone missions over my house, and it is not good news in that file. You know, Thomas Ayer, who is a former Secretary of Special Education at the U.S. Department of Education and Professor Emeritus at Harvard, he studied the deficit model around young folks who don't fit school in the IEPs and the 504s and the response intervention plans, in all of it. And his research showed that for every one strength, competency, capacity, talent, gift, for every one, there's upwards of 25 or more weaknesses and deficits documented in those files. Deficit model, you know, and nobody thrives. No human lives a good life only hearing about what's wrong with them. We got to flip that script. We got to challenge it head on. I know the power of that in my own life. You know, I had this teacher in third grade named Mr. R. Mr. R, ferocious commitment to the idea that every single human being, every student had something right with them. And Mr. R believed to his core that his job as an educator wasn't to just disseminate facts and figures, wasn't to just build basic skills. His job was to find the good in every kid and build on it. And so he would ask every student, you know, hey, what are you good at? What do you like? What do you love? And he would ask me that question, what are you good at? And I was over in IEP special ed land. So I would say, Mr. R, I ain't good at anything, man. Nothing. I'm not good at anything. But he never gave up on me. And one day he came to me and he said, look, Jonathan, you're wrong about yourself. And I think a lot of people are wrong about you too. I've been watching you, and you are so good at telling stories. Now, sometimes they're inappropriate stories you tell, but I don't care. You are so good at telling stories that you could be a writer. I was 9 years old, y'all. I had just been diagnosed with dyslexia. I looked at Mr. R and I said, Mr. R, a writer? You really believe that I could be a writer? Are you out of your goddamn mind? I can't spell, I said to him. And he looked right at me and he said, Jonathan, in my class, screw spelling. Screw spelling, man. Yeah. You should have seen me just jump out of my body because for the first time in my life, somebody said, forget what you can't do and define yourself by what you can do. And that was a revelation in my sense of self, to be seen as somebody with competencies, with capacities. And it was a revolution in my education, because research shows by the Gallup organization that when a young person believes the adults and the teachers in their life knows their strengths, they're 70%, 70% more engaged in learning. Find the good in every single student. Flip that deficit script, because the truth is, young folks with neurodivergence who thrive in life, they don't fix what's wrong with them. They use teams, accommodations, technologies to mitigate their weaknesses and scale their strengths. And every single young person deserves a Mr., Mrs., or Ms. R in their life. Every young person deserves an identity and an education that's grounded not in what's wrong with them, but in what's right with them. Okay, I want to conclude, and in concluding, I want to come back to kind of the elephant in the room here. And that's this idea of a normal human, and this deeply entrenched cultural belief that normality is a prerequisite to personhood. You know, when I walked out of that school psychologist's office when I was 9 and the tissues were on the table and they read that report, and I asked my mom, "Hey, Mom, what's wrong with me?" The next question I asked her was, "Mom, am I normal?" Because in that moment, the dichotomy of normal and not normal, or abnormal, became lodged in my sense of self. And I was on the wrong side now. And I was committed to trying to do everything I could to get back. So I said, "Hey, Ma, am I normal?" And my mom looked at me and she said, "Jonathan, normal sucks." And you know, it took me a long time, way too long, to be honest, to come to that conclusion on my own. But like a lot of things our parents tell us that we reject at first, my mom was right. Normal sucks. You know, the word normal did not enter the English language until the 1880s. It emerged within a cultural context of industrialization and standardization, where there was a economic imperative to make us all more the same, opposed to celebrate and embrace what makes us different. And that word normal has been put to nefarious and dangerous ends in the height of the eugenics movement. Deficients, defectives, the official term in textbooks for folks with brain and body differences. They were institutionalized and sterilized. The scientists in Nazi Germany traveled to the United States, pseudoscientists, by the way, to study our eugenic policies, and brought them back as the foundation of their eugenic Holocaust. The first group to be systemically targeted in Nazi Germany for extermination in something called Operation T4 were people with disabilities, because they were not fully human people when you viewed them through the lens of normality. So damn right, normal sucks. It sucks for folks who have found themselves on the wrong side of it. But the truth is, it sucks for everybody, because the reality is the only normal human being is somebody you don't know very well. Because the moment you get to know another human being for who they are, not for who we think they should be, it's their differences it's their disabilities, it's their fallibility that constitutes their humanity. You know, there's a saying in the disability rights movement, we're all temporarily abled bodies and minds. We will all experience disability at some point in our life. It's an essential human trait. So our work is about reimagining learning, not around the norm or the factory, but around the reality of different. But ultimately, our work is bigger than that and more important than ever. Our work is to fight for every human being's right to be different. So thank you all so much for listening to me talk kind of at you. I know we went a little bit long. I hope y'all can hang for another minute. We'll see if there's anything going on in the chat. But before we do that, in case you got to go, my email address, if you have a question that we don't get to, it's my name. Hopefully, we can put it in the chat. It's Jonathan Mooney, JonathanMooney, Jonathan Mooney at me.com. Hit me an email. You can find me on the social stuff. It's just the Jonathan Mooney. And there it is right there. And we'll now see if there's any questions on the chat before we call it a night.
I thank you so much, Jonathan. I want to shout out to the first question actually, because we have some students that are on this who are currently taking EDU 533 integrated learning with Professor Mayton, who posed the question, and she's saying anything you can do to touch on different approaches for different learners that would be directly relevant to this classes. And I was thinking how you talked about problem solving and HD learners. So you think of how that kind of connects, and I wonder if you had other thoughts on that.
Yeah, let me give a couple hot takes on some concrete things that y'all could think about. One, co-create with students some solutions. Anytime we gather a group of human beings, whether it's 4, whether it's 50, the cognitive needs of that group are going to be different than the last group that you gathered, and the solutions that you're going to want to operationalize might be different. So engaging as a community building, but also a pedagogical co-creation activity of, hey, tell me about optimal learning environments for you in your life. And I found that's a question that resonates and can be answered by a whole continuum of learners from very young to college. Like, talk to me about when you felt most engaged as a learner. What was going on? Now, look, you got a class of 25, 30. I know that's the reality, 40 many times, of young folks in public education. We don't have a system that's designed to meet all those needs. So we're trying to have perfect not be the enemy of the good. So in that co-creation process, we acknowledge the limitations that we face in a system built for factory education. We acknowledge that we're trying to work within those constraints and do better, but it won't be perfect. So we ask that question of, when has it been optimal for you to learn? And we take that and start to co-create some strategies. 2, I can tell you a pretty universal human learning experience is active learning. And active learning can take a couple forms. One is trying to rethink the desk, or that 75% of the day sitting there at the desk. That can be fidgets, that can be breaks, etc. But ultimately, we're trying to move from a sit and get experience, sitting and getting information, to a moving and doing environment. So any time to bring in the application, the do part of human learning, they both have a place. I'm down with a cool lecture. I like to get information, and then I like to apply it. So that's a well documented well-researched best practice that has efficacy for a continuum of different learners. Um, and then the last thing, which is not a pedagogical like tactic, but it's a I think it's an essential classroom, uh, uh, beyond classroom, essential question to ask all students of, you know, what do you care about? You know, what are the ideas? What are the things in the world that you care about? Because what we know about motivation is human beings are most motivated when they're doing something aligned with their strengths and their interests. And sometimes those can be different things. Like, you know, reading wasn't one of my strengths, but storytelling was, and stories were. So when I could tap into that, I was willing to do the hard work of and the really painful work of reading, because I started to understand that it was in service of something I cared about, not something you or my parents or my teacher cared about, but what I cared about. And having that be central to a vision of how we engage and motivate young people in a classroom is foundational to sort of flipping the script, because most of the classrooms, not just are they deficit oriented, remediation oriented, but they're also adult directed. You know, hey, this is the curriculum from the state of Pennsylvania or California. You got to do it because. Why? Well, just because. We got to get past that because and try to connect to some intrinsically motivating parts for people, for young folks. That'll be their guide through some of these hard moments. Appreciate the question. Right on.
That's excellent. Do you have time for another one?
Yeah, dude, I got it. Yeah.
Professor Nagel, who teaches EDU 532, moral education and other things at Gratz, but he posted, he's asked, do you give talks at public schools and what that's like?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, thanks for doing the good work of moral education. We need more of you. We need more of you out there on the front lines, helping us think about what kind of humans we want to be. You know, and I think the country is in a moment of reckoning around that question. Who do we want to be? You know, how do we want to treat other human beings? What values do we believe and stand by? So I appreciate the good work that you're doing out there. Yeah, hey, I talk 25 years, you know, kindergartners, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 CEOs, everything in between. Just between you know, I'm the kindergartners being better than the CEOs any day of the week. Um, and look, I don't know if any of you all are tracking the targeting the Federal Department of Education for elimination. And there's a emerging, seems like coordinated effort to start really uh, discrediting as wasteful expenditure of taxpayer money the services for children with disabilities and learning differences. There's an op-ed in the New York Times in which that's articulated today. And this is a precarious moment for us. So I say that to say this. Anyone that's out there at a public school wanting to elevate and advocate for diverse learners, um, uh, little money, no money. If I can be in service of that, I'm there. You know, if we do something via Zoom and it's free, I'm in. Because we're in a moment where it's all hands on deck. And any way I can support people out there who are trying to advance equity and inclusion, I'm in. So long-winded way to say, hit me an email if that's something you're interested in, and appreciate the good work you do.
There's a question I think comes from us all the way from Arizona. Which I think is interesting. How do you deal with a student who doesn't seem to care about anything?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I think we are in a moment of cultural nihilism, um, and that's infectious. And some of one's apathy or disillusionment is justified, given the state of many facets of society today. But that doesn't mean we give up. And so, with a student that appears to not care about anything, um, underneath that is often a phenomena of learned helplessness, which is a well established construct from the discipline of positive psychology, researcher out of UPenn named, really luminary named Martin Seligman. And learned helplessness was a construct that was began to be validated through a series of experiments in which um, uh, animal, monkey, varying ones were shocked consistently. And so, like, it would be shocked on one side of the cage, it would try to escape, it'd be okay, it'd be shocked on the other, and it would be safe. But then they would turn both the shockers on, and the researchers are trying to answer the question, what happens when something's in pain all the time? Um, and the answer is it gives up. So the path out of that is to find a way to make it hurt less. Um, and that should be the organizing intervention, for a child is who seems to be disengaged and not care about anything, to find a place to turn that shocker off a little bit, and then, and maybe even not even, and then at the same time, um, start to just, anytime you go a little hint of something that is intrinsically motivating, you jump on it, and you make time to nurture that. My mom would take me out of school on Fridays. We would ditch school because Friday was like spelling test day, and what a wonderful way to end the week, like spelling test day. So we would go to like the zoo because I loved animals. We would go to construction sites because I like to build. But those things all came later. At first, it was just not going to school on Friday to take a break. And then the kind of green shoots of interest started to emerge, and she pounced on them and engaged with them. The other thing I will say, because I think this is important and I think this is research based, this is not exactly on point to this question, but it's tangentially relevant, is we've unleashed a digital ecosystem on children's brains that is going to have generational consequences. And like many things in America, we kind of look back too late and say, "Oh, we should have been regulating this." Um, and there's a correlation between screen addiction and apathy. There's a correlation between social media addiction and um, disinterest in other things, and a part of it um, is just dopamine hangover. Um, that's the experience of digital products. Is they're designed to addict. They're a casino. They literally have been designed. The most popular course at Stanford Business School for entrepreneurs is a course called Designed to Addict, and it's teaching them how to create digital products that addict you like a casino does. So thinking critically about if there's apathy in a child, if there's low energy, if thinking critically about that being a part of the origin of it and taking some steps, I think that's important too.
And maybe if we have one more question, I think this might be a good one to end on.
Yeah, let's do it.
It's a great question. It comes from one of my former students. That's why. But Colin is a third grade teacher, and he's going to go to school tomorrow where he has a student in his class who's, reminds him of you very much, who's very aware of their own limitations and have in ways accepted, these negative learning identity that's been put on them. So the question is, how can he be a champion? How can we all be a champion for these students tomorrow?
With macro, macro, go into your class tomorrow and for all kids say, I want you to spend 3 minutes writing down what you're good at and what is beautiful about you. And then for students who are comfortable sharing that, have a place on the board. That there's a teacher, third grade teacher that I knew that had a strengths board where everyone went up to their thing with a beautiful star on it and put their strength up there. And so that stayed front and center to the classroom every single day. So that's a classroom-wide activity. That's about switching that narrative. It's about switching the smart kid is the kid who reads well. There's many ways to be smart, and let's celebrate it. The micro with that student is 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 to say, look, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. And if you got a little, you know, uh, another 2 minutes, pop up a video of my friend with Derek Horn talking about his journey, who's now a artist activist. Pull up my boy Roberto Rivera talking about his experience being in the sped room and now starting businesses. Show 30 seconds of me, whatever. But say there's nothing wrong with you. Look, here's who you are and who you will become, and I believe in you.
Excellent. And who those names that you mentioned again?
Yeah. Um, I mentioned this before, so I'll try to be more explicit with it. So, you know, we know that young folks who have negative learning identities need role models to help them get out of it. That's true across the board. So when I was in college, I co-founded something called Eye to Eye with Peter Hawking that took college kids with learning differences and they shared their stories with children. It was all about that. So you can check out eye2eyenational.org. That's a way to find content that helps with this. There's so many good public advocates out there. Three that I mentioned is a man named Roberto Rivera, Dav Pinkley for 100%. Those are badass books. Love them. Roberto Rivera with Derek Horn, the co-founder and CEO of Eye to Eye, David Flink, and many, many others. You can find little clips of them sharing their stories. One other resource that I'd want to give you, a very cool venture called Superpower Mentors. They're doing again peer or near peer mentoring work in a digital format. Again, all about you're not alone, you're not broken. I did it, and you can too. It's not that complicated, but it's hard. So that's the some resources around that identity formation things that we can start to put out there.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you so much. I would love to be in all these classes tomorrow because you're going to have a direct impact, I feel like, on learning and teaching that goes on tomorrow. Thank you so much, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone who's been on this call and has contributed. There's been a lot of great ideas and comments put in the chats. People really responded to different pieces, different things you said, and these resources. So thank you so much for joining
I
us.
appreciate y'all, and if you hang out, because special education is the fastest growing population in schools, and it's some of the hardest jobs to fill. So if you're at all interested, it's life-changing work, and I know you're going to do a little Q&A, and I'll say goodnight now. Don't be a stranger. Hit me an email, and if you're on a mission to elevate disability neurodivergence, count me in. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jonathan.
Bye.